The clock on Renee Washington's dashboard read 9:47 p.m. as she glanced anxiously at her daughter in the rearview mirror. 6-year-old Lily was slumped against the car seat, her usual bright eyes now dull with fever, small beads of sweat glistening on her forehead despite the cool autumn evening. "Just 5 more minutes, sweetheart. We're almost there," Renee said, her voice steady despite the worry gnawing at her insides. The thermometer had read 103.8 degrees at home, and Lily had been complaining that her throat hurt so badly she couldn't swallow. After a day of trying cool compresses, children's fever reducer, and plenty of fluids, Renee had finally made the decision to head to the emergency room when Lily became disoriented. Renee was not one to panic. As a federal judge who had spent 15 years on the bench, she prided herself on staying calm under pressure. But this was different. This was her daughter, her only child born after years of trying and hoping. Nothing in law school or her distinguished legal career had prepared her for the helplessness she felt watching her child suffer. "Mommy," came the weak voice from the back seat. "I'm cold." Renee's heart sank. Cold despite the fever. That wasn't good. "We're pulling into the hospital now, baby. Just hold on." The bright lights of Lakeview Memorial Hospital's emergency entrance came into view. Renee pulled up to the entrance and was relieved to see a security guard approaching. He was an older man with kind eyes, and he quickly understood the situation. "I'll watch your car, ma'am. Go on in with your little one," he said, motioning toward the automatic doors. Renee scooped Lily into her arms, feeling the heat radiating through the child's pajamas. The weight of her daughter, normally so full of energy, now limp against her chest, made Renee walk faster. The emergency waiting room was surprisingly quiet for a Thursday night. Only a handful of people sat scattered across the blue plastic chairs. A young man with his arm in a makeshift sling, an elderly woman with what appeared to be her adult son, a college-aged girl holding an ice pack to her ankle. Renee approached the reception desk where a nurse was typing on a computer. The woman barely looked up. "My daughter has a very high fever over 103. She's becoming disoriented and says she's cold. She needs to see a doctor right away," Renee explained, still cradling Lily in her arms. The nurse glanced up, her eyes moving between Renee and Lily with a flicker of something Renee couldn't quite place. "Fill these out," she said, sliding a clipboard across the desk. "We'll call you when it's your turn." Renee hesitated. "I understand you have procedures, but my daughter's condition is serious. She needs immediate attention." "Everyone here thinks their emergency is the most important," the nurse replied, her tone flat. "Please fill out the forms and take a seat." Renee wanted to argue, to explain that she understood triage procedures perfectly well, but Lily whimpered against her shoulder, reminding her that comfort was the priority now. So she took the clipboard and found seats as far from other patients as possible, aware of the risk of exposing Lily to additional illnesses. As she filled out the insurance information and medical history, Renee noticed the young man with the sling being called in after just a few minutes of waiting. She glanced at the time on her phone, 9:58 p.m. She noted it mentally but continued writing. Lily curled into her side, eyes closed but clearly not sleeping comfortably. Renee ran her fingers through her daughter's braids, tucking them behind her ear, and placed a gentle kiss on her forehead. Still burning up, the elderly woman was called next, at 10:07 p.m. Then the college girl with the ankle, who had arrived after them, was called at 10:15 p.m. By 10:30 p.m., 3 more patients had arrived and 2 of them had already been called back. Meanwhile, Lily's condition was visibly worsening. Her breathing had become more rapid and she was drifting in and out of consciousness. Renee approached the desk again, holding Lily, who was now too weak to walk on her own. "Excuse me, but my daughter's condition is deteriorating. Her fever isn't responding to the medication I gave her earlier, and she's becoming less responsive. She needs to be seen immediately." The nurse looked up with an expression of mild annoyance. "The doctor will see you when it's your turn. There are other patients ahead of you." "I've been watching people who came in after us get called back," Renee said, fighting to keep her voice level. "My daughter is showing signs of serious illness. At the very least, someone should check her temperature and vitals." "We have a system," the nurse replied coldly, "and I'm going to need you to lower your voice." Renee hadn't raised her voice at all, and the implied accusation stung. She'd encountered this before, the assumption that she was being aggressive when she was simply being assertive. After 15 years on the federal bench, she was well practiced in remaining composed when others might lose their temper. "I'm not raising my voice," she said evenly. "I'm expressing concern for my child, who is showing signs of a potentially dangerous high fever. Could you please at least take her temperature?" The nurse sighed dramatically and reached for a thermometer. After taking Lily's temperature, her eyebrows raised slightly. 103.9, she said. "I'll make a note in the system." Renee waited for more, for the nurse to call a doctor, to show some urgency, but the woman simply returned to her computer screen. "Shouldn't that temperature warrant immediate attention?" Renee asked. "The doctor will determine that when he sees you," came the reply without even a glance up from the screen. Renee returned to her seat, a familiar weight settling in her chest. She'd navigated similar situations throughout her life, people making assumptions, setting barriers, creating different standards. Usually she addressed these inequities through her work, through careful application of the law. But tonight she was just a mother with a sick child, and the usual channels of recourse weren't available to her. A man in scrubs walked into the waiting area and called another name, a patient who had arrived at least 20 minutes after Renee and Lily. The mother in Renee wanted to scream. The judge in her wanted to demand fairness, to cite relevant precedents about equal treatment under the law. But the pragmatist in her knew that her daughter's care was in the hands of these people, and antagonizing them might only delay help further. So she held Lily closer and whispered stories in her ear. Tales of brave princesses who outsmarted dragons and built kingdoms where everyone was treated with kindness. The kind of world Renee worked to create through her rulings, one case at a time. By 11:15 p.m., Renee's patience had reached its limit. Lily was now slipping in and out of sleep, her small body radiating heat like a furnace. 2 more rounds of patients had been called while they continued to wait. When a doctor finally emerged and walked past them to call yet another patient who had arrived later, Renee made a decision. Still carrying Lily, she approached the reception desk once more. "I need to speak with the attending physician immediately," she said, her tone carrying the same quiet authority that commanded respect in her courtroom. "My daughter has been waiting for nearly 2 hours with a dangerous fever that is not responding to medication." "This is unacceptable." The nurse looked up, clearly irritated. "The doctor is with patients. You'll have to continue waiting." "Then I need to speak with a hospital administrator," Renee replied. "There is no medical justification for making a child with a 104-degree fever wait, while people with less urgent conditions are seen first." The nurse's lips thinned into a tight line. She picked up a phone and pressed a few buttons, speaking in a low voice. A minute later, a man in a white coat emerged from the double doors leading to the examination rooms. "I'm Dr. Reynolds," he said, looking at the nurse rather than at Renee or Lily. "What seems to be the problem here?" Before the nurse could answer, Renee spoke up. "The problem is that my daughter has been waiting for almost 2 hours with a dangerously high fever, while multiple patients who arrived after us have been seen. She's becoming less responsive and no one here seems concerned." Dr. Reynolds finally turned to look at them, his gaze lingering on Renee's face before briefly scanning Lily. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes were cold. "We have protocols for determining the order of treatment," he said. "If you've been waiting, it's because other cases were deemed more urgent." Renee felt something in her chest tighten, a familiar tension she'd learned to recognize over the years. It wasn't just about wait times or protocols. It was about being seen, truly seen, and being valued equally. It was about her child receiving the same level of concern and care that would be automatically granted to others. As Lily stirred weakly in her arms, Renee knew the real emergency was just beginning. And she understood, with the clarity that had guided her legal career, that what happened next would not just be about getting her daughter the medical attention she desperately needed. It would be about confronting a deeper sickness, one that no antibiotic could cure. Renee stood her ground, Lily growing heavier in her arms. The girl's breathing had become shallow, each exhale a warm puff against her mother's neck. In her 15 years on the federal bench, Renee had faced down hardened criminals, corrupt officials, and aggressive attorneys, but nothing compared to the fear clawing at her chest as her daughter's condition worsened. "Dead by the minute." "Dr. Reynolds," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My daughter's temperature is nearly 104 degrees. She's becoming less responsive. I understand you have protocols, but I'm asking you to examine her now." The doctor's eyes narrowed slightly, He looked at his watch. An expensive one, Renee noted automatically. The kind lawyers often bought after winning their first big case. If you continue to be disruptive, you'll only delay your daughter's treatment further, he said. The threat was thinly veiled, his tone suggesting he was dealing with a problem rather than a patient. I'm not being disruptive, Renee replied. I'm advocating for my child who is clearly in distress. She shifted Lily in her arms, revealing the girl's flushed face. Please, just look at her. Dr. Reynolds glanced at Lily, but his gaze was clinical, detached. He didn't reach out to touch her forehead or check her pulse. He didn't show any of the concern Renee had expected from someone whose job was to heal. Children get fevers all the time, he said dismissively. It's probably just a virus. She doesn't appear to be in any acute distress. The words struck Renee like a physical blow. Lily was limp in her arms, burning with fever, drifting in and out of consciousness. How was that not acute distress? Doctor, she tried again. Her fever hasn't responded to medication. She's become disoriented. These are warning signs of something serious. Meningitis, perhaps, or a severe infection. Surely that warrants immediate attention. Dr. Reynolds' posture stiffened. Did you attend medical school, Ms.? He paused, waiting for her to fill in her name. Washington, she supplied. Renee Washington. And no, I didn't attend medical school, but Then I suggest you leave the medical diagnoses to those who did, he cut in. We'll call you when it's your turn. He turned to walk away, but Renee wasn't finished. Doctor, she called after him. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for appropriate medical care for a child with concerning symptoms. Dr. Reynolds stopped and turned back slowly, his expression hardening. Ms. Washington, are you sure you can afford the treatment here? We have other facilities in the area that might be more suitable for your situation. The implication hung in the air between them. Renee felt a familiar heat rise in her chest. Not embarrassment, but the slow burn of righteous anger she'd learned to channel productively over years of facing similar assumptions. I have excellent insurance, she said evenly, which I've already provided information about. But that's irrelevant to whether my daughter needs immediate medical attention. The nurse behind the desk was watching the exchange with poorly concealed interest. A few of the waiting patients had turned to observe as well. Dr. Reynolds lowered his voice. Look, I understand you're concerned, but making a scene isn't going to help your daughter. If you can't wait patiently like everyone else, perhaps you should try another hospital. I've been waiting patiently for 2 hours while watching people who arrived after us get called in first, Renee replied, keeping her voice calm despite the frustration building inside her. My daughter's condition is deteriorating before your eyes, and you're suggesting we drive to another hospital? Lily stirred in her arms, whimpering softly. Mommy, my head really hurts, she murmured, her voice barely audible. The doctor didn't even look at Lily. Instead, he turned to the nurse. Call security, he said. We have a disruptive individual in the waiting room. Renee couldn't believe what she was hearing. You're calling security instead of helping my child? She asked, incredulous. You're creating a disturbance, Dr. Reynolds replied coldly. You're upsetting the other patients and interfering with hospital procedures. Renee looked around the waiting room. The few people there were indeed watching, but most looked concerned rather than upset. An older gentleman actually nodded at her encouragingly. The only procedure I'm interfering with, Renee said, is the one that's allowing you to ignore a seriously ill child. The security guard from the entrance appeared, walking unhurriedly toward them. He was the same kind-eyed older man who had offered to watch her car earlier. What seems to be the problem? He asked, looking between Renee and the doctor. Before Renee could respond, Dr. Reynolds spoke. This woman is being aggressive and refusing to follow hospital protocols. She's demanding immediate treatment ahead of other patients. The security guard looked at Renee holding Lily, took in the child's flushed face and limp posture. Ma'am, is your little one all right? He asked, genuine concern in his voice. No, she's not. Renee answered honestly. She has a dangerous fever that's gotten worse while we've been waiting. All I'm asking is for someone to examine her. The security guard turned to Dr. Reynolds. Doctor, the child does look pretty sick to me. Dr. Reynolds' face tightened. Are you a medical professional now, Joe? I didn't realize security personnel were qualified to make triage decisions. The guard, Joe apparently, looked taken aback by the doctor's sharp tone. No, sir, just making an observation. Well, stick to securing the premises, Dr. Reynolds snapped. And please escort Ms. Washington back to her seat or out of the building if she continues to be disruptive. Joe hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Ma'am, why don't we step aside for a moment and talk this through? He suggested gently to Renee. Renee appreciated his attempt to de-escalate, but she wasn't going to be sidetracked. There's nothing to talk through, she said firmly. My daughter needs medical attention now. That's the beginning and end of this conversation. Dr. Reynolds' face had taken on a reddish tinge. I've had enough of this. Joe, if she won't cooperate, call the police. We have a zero-tolerance policy for aggressive behavior in this hospital. Renee almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. She, who had sent people to federal prison for serious crimes, was now being threatened with arrest for advocating for her sick child. Dr. Reynolds, she said. Her judge's voice emerging now, the one that could silence a courtroom without raising its volume. I want your full name and medical license number. Please. The doctor blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Excuse me? Your full name and license number, Renee repeated calmly. And I'd like the hospital administrator's contact information as well, since you're refusing to provide care to my daughter and threatening to have me removed for requesting it. I'll need that information for the formal complaint I'll be filing. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Dr. Reynolds' face, quickly replaced by defiance. Is that a threat, Ms. Washington? It's not a threat, Renee replied. It's a statement of fact. You have a legal and ethical obligation to provide appropriate medical care. Your failure to do so, especially when that failure appears to be based on factors other than medical necessity, has consequences. The waiting room had gone silent. Even the nurse had stopped typing, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she watched. Dr. Reynolds leaned in closer, his voice low and menacing. You people always think you're special, don't you? That the rules don't apply to you? That you can just demand whatever you want? The words hung in the air like poison. You people. The mask had slipped, revealing what Renee had suspected all along. This wasn't just about hospital protocols or busy emergency rooms. This was about who was seen as deserving of care, of concern, of basic human dignity. In her courtroom, Renee would have admonished anyone who spoke that way. She would have made a record of it, ensuring those words were preserved in black and white for appellate review. But this wasn't her courtroom. Here she was just a mother holding her sick child, facing a man who held the power to help or harm and had chosen the latter. My daughter deserves the same care as any other child in this hospital, she said quietly, her eyes never leaving his. That's not special treatment. That's basic equality. Dr. Reynolds stepped back, his face a mask of professional detachment once more. Joe, he said to the security guard, please call the police. Ms. Washington is refusing to comply with hospital procedures and creating a hostile environment. Joe looked deeply uncomfortable, but reached slowly for the radio clipped to his belt. At that moment, Lily began to tremble in Renee's arms, her small body shaking with chills despite the burning fever. She's having rigors, Renee said urgently. Please, Dr. Reynolds, whatever you think of me, my daughter needs help now. For a split second, Renee thought she saw a flicker of actual concern cross the doctor's face, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The police will help sort this out, he said coldly, turning away. Joe, make that call. Joe hesitated, looking at Lily with genuine worry. Doctor, the child really doesn't look good. Maybe we should make the call, Dr. Reynolds repeated firmly. As Joe reluctantly began to speak into his radio, an older woman in a white coat emerged from the double doors leading to the treatment area. She had silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun and wore glasses on a chain around her neck. What's going on out here? She asked, her gaze moving between Dr. Reynolds, Renee holding Lily and the security guard with his radio. Dr. Reynolds straightened his posture. Dr. Chen, I'm handling a disruptive individual who's demanding special treatment. Dr. Chen's eyes fell on Lily, and unlike Dr. Reynolds, she immediately stepped forward, her hand reaching out to touch the child's forehead. How long has she been like this? She asked Renee, already taking Lily's wrist to check her pulse. Her fever started this morning, Renee explained quickly. It's been getting worse despite medication. She's become disoriented in the last hour, complaining of headache and neck pain. We've been waiting for almost 2 hours. Dr. Chen's eyes widened slightly at this information. She looked sharply at Dr. Reynolds. This child needs to be seen immediately, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Dr. Chen, Reynolds began. There are other patients who... This child has symptoms consistent with meningitis, Dr. Chen cut him off. She needs immediate assessment, blood work, and possibly a lumbar puncture. This is not a case that should have been left in the waiting room. The shift in the atmosphere was immediate. The nurse behind the desk stood up. Joe lowered his radio, and Dr. Reynolds' face went through a series of expressions: surprise, disbelief, and something that looked almost like fear. Dr. Chen took Lily from Renee's arms with gentle authority, the kind that made Renee instinctively trust her. "We need to get her into a treatment room right away," she said, already moving toward the double doors. Renee followed closely, relief washing over her that someone was finally taking Lily's condition seriously. But Dr. Reynolds stepped directly into her path, his arm extended like a barrier. "Hospital policy allows only one parent in the treatment area," he said, his voice clipped. "You'll need to wait out here." Dr. Chen turned back, Lily limp in her arms. "Thomas, this child's mother needs to come with us. She has vital information about the onset and progression of symptoms. Protocol states," Dr. Reynolds began, but Dr. Chen cut him off. "I'm overriding protocol. Ms. Washington, please come with me." Renee moved to follow, but Dr. Reynolds didn't budge. His face had taken on a stubborn, almost petulant expression. "The security situation hasn't been resolved," he insisted. "We can't have potentially disruptive individuals in the treatment area." Joe, the security guard, shifted uncomfortably. His radio crackled with a voice asking for status. "Police are on their way," he said quietly to Dr. Reynolds. "Should I tell them to stand down?" Before the doctor could answer, the automatic doors at the entrance slid open and a police officer walked in. He was younger than Renee had expected, maybe in his early 30s, with a solid build and alert eyes that quickly scanned the room. "Evening," he said, approaching the group. "Officer Rivera? Someone called about a disturbance?" Dr. Reynolds immediately stepped forward. "Yes, officer. This woman has been creating a scene, refusing to follow hospital procedures and intimidating staff. We've asked her repeatedly to comply, but she's becoming increasingly aggressive." Officer Rivera looked at Renee, then at Lily and Dr. Chen's arms, then back at Dr. Reynolds. His expression revealed nothing. "Ma'am," he addressed Renee, "can you tell me what's happening here?" Before Renee could speak, Dr. Chen intervened. "Officer, I'm Dr. Chen, Chief of Emergency Medicine. This child needs immediate medical attention. Her symptoms are consistent with bacterial meningitis, which is life-threatening. There's been a misunderstanding about the urgency of her condition, but right now, my priority is getting her treated. Ms. Washington needs to come with us to provide medical history." The officer nodded slowly, taking in the information. "So there's no actual security threat here?" "The only threat," Dr. Chen said firmly, "is to this child if we delay treatment any further." Dr. Reynolds' face flushed. "Dr. Chen, with all due respect, I was handling this situation. This woman has been demanding special treatment, disrupting the waiting room and threatening staff with complaints. We have protocols for a reason." Officer Rivera looked at Renee again, this time more carefully. His gaze wasn't suspicious, but assessing. "Ma'am, have you been threatening anyone?" "I asked for Dr. Reynolds' name and license number for a formal complaint after he refused to examine my daughter and suggested we go to a different hospital," Renee explained calmly. "My daughter has been seriously ill and deteriorating while we waited for nearly 2 hours, watching patients who arrived after us being called in first." The officer's expression remained neutral, but his eyes moved back to Lily, taking in her flushed face and limp form. "Dr. Chen, in your medical opinion, should this child have been waiting for 2 hours?" "Absolutely not," Dr. Chen replied without hesitation. "A child with these symptoms should be seen immediately." A small crowd had gathered around them now, nurses, orderlies, and a few curious patients. The tension in the air was palpable. Officer Rivera seemed to make a decision. "Dr. Chen, please proceed with treatment for the child. I'll sort this out with Dr. Reynolds." He turned to Renee. "Ma'am, go with your daughter. We can talk later if necessary." Relief flooded through Renee. She moved toward Dr. Chen and Lily, but Dr. Reynolds suddenly stepped between them again. "Officer, you don't understand," he insisted. "This woman is manipulating the situation. She's been disruptive and uncooperative since she arrived. Hospital policy clearly states..." "Step aside, doctor," Officer Rivera said, his voice taking on the unmistakable tone of authority. "Medical emergency takes precedence over administrative concerns. For a moment, Dr. Reynolds seemed ready to argue further, but something in the officer's expression stopped him. He moved aside reluctantly, his eyes cold as Renee passed. Dr. Chen led the way through the double doors into the treatment area, walking briskly down a corridor lined with rooms. Medical staff moved purposefully around them, some glancing curiously at the procession, Dr. Chen carrying Lily, Renee following closely, and Officer Rivera bringing up the rear, perhaps sensing that the situation still needed his presence. They entered a treatment room where a nurse was already waiting. Alerted by Dr. Chen through some unseen signal system, the room was bright and clinical, with monitors, cabinets of supplies, and a narrow bed with raised rails. "I need a full workup," Dr. Chen instructed the nurse as she gently laid Lily on the bed. "CBC, blood cultures, chemistry panel, and alert the lab that we may need CSF analysis. Start a line for IV fluids and prepare for antipyretics." The nurse moved quickly, gathering supplies while Dr. Chen turned to Renee. "When did the fever first start, and what was her temperature?" she asked, already examining Lily's eyes with a penlight. As Renee recounted the progression of symptoms, the initial fever that morning, the failed attempts to bring it down with over-the-counter medication, the increasing lethargy and confusion, Dr. Chen listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking a clarifying question. Officer Rivera stood quietly by the door, observing. His presence was unobtrusive but somehow reassuring to Renee, as if he'd appointed himself guardian against further interference from Dr. Reynolds. The nurse returned with equipment for the IV, and Renee held Lily's hand as they inserted the needle. Her daughter was so out of it that she barely reacted to the prick, which worried Renee even more. "Is it meningitis?" she asked Dr. Chen, the word hanging heavy in the air. As a judge, Renee had learned to face difficult truths directly, but as a mother she found herself hoping for a different answer. "We need to run tests to confirm," Dr. Chen replied, her tone gentle but honest. "But yes, that's what I'm concerned about. The combination of high fever, headache, neck pain, and altered consciousness is concerning. We're going to start antibiotics now, before we even have the test results. In cases like this, we don't wait." Renee nodded, grateful for the doctor's straightforward approach. "Will she be okay?" The question came out smaller than she intended, her judicial confidence momentarily replaced by maternal fear. Dr. Chen met her eyes. "We caught it in time, I believe. The next few hours will tell us more, but she's getting the treatment she needs. Now." The emphasis on now wasn't lost on Renee. It was a quiet acknowledgement of what they both knew, that this treatment should have happened hours ago as the nurse hung an IV bag and connected it to Lily's line. Dr. Chen continued her examination, checking Lily's reflexes and response to stimuli. Officer Rivera's radio crackled and he stepped outside briefly to respond. When he returned, his expression had changed subtly. He approached Renee with what seemed like newfound respect. "Ms. Washington," he said quietly, "I've just been informed by dispatch that they ran your name as standard procedure. When a call comes in and I'm a federal judge," Renee finished for him, her voice low. She hadn't mentioned it before because it shouldn't have mattered. Her daughter deserved care because she was a sick child, not because her mother sat on the federal bench. Officer Rivera nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I apologize for the situation you've encountered here tonight." Dr. Chen looked up sharply from examining Lily, surprise evident on her face. She hadn't known either. At that moment, the door swung open and a man in a suit entered. He was tall with graying hair and a deeply concerned expression. "I'm Philip Thompson, hospital administrator," he said, looking directly at Renee. "Judge Washington, I've just been informed of the situation. I want to assure you that what happened tonight is not representative of our hospital's standards of care." So word had traveled fast. Renee wondered who had made the connection. Perhaps someone in the waiting room had recognized her from a high-profile case. Or maybe the police dispatch had alerted hospital administration about the identity of the disruptive patient. "Mr. Thompson," Renee said evenly, "right now my only concern is my daughter's treatment. But when she's stable, we will indeed have a conversation about the standard of care at this hospital, specifically about how that standard seems to vary, depending on who's seeking care." The administrator nodded, looking genuinely troubled. "Of course, Your Honor. Dr. Chen is our finest physician. Your daughter is in excellent hands now." The "now" hung in the air again, an inadvertent acknowledgement of what had transpired before. Dr. Reynolds appeared in the doorway behind Thompson, his expression a mixture of shock and dawning horror as he took in the scene. The hospital administrator, the police officer's respectful demeanor, and the realization of exactly who he had threatened to have removed from the hospital. "Judge Washington," he said, his voice suddenly deferential. "I wasn't aware of your position. I assure you that the delay in treatment wasn't—" "Dr. Reynolds." Renee interrupted, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had silenced many a courtroom. "My position is irrelevant. What matters is that a seriously ill child was left waiting for hours, while less urgent cases were prioritized. The fact that you're suddenly concerned now that you know I'm a judge only confirms the nature of the problem." Dr. Reynolds flinched as if she'd struck him. Behind him, Joe the security guard looked on with a mixture of concern and what might have been approval. "I think," Dr. Chen said firmly, looking up from attending to Lily, "that we need to focus on the patient now. Anyone not directly involved in treatment should step outside." The hospital administrator nodded quickly. "Of course, Doctor. Judge Washington, if there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to ask. I've instructed staff to give you and your daughter our full attention and resources." The irony wasn't lost on Renee. Full attention and resources. Exactly what should have been provided from the moment they walked through the door. As the men filed out, Officer Rivera paused. "Judge Washington, would you like to file a formal complaint about tonight's events? I can take your statement once your daughter is stable." Renee looked at Lily, now connected to monitors and IVs, her small chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. The anger and indignation she felt were real and justified, but there was a larger issue at play, one that wouldn't be resolved by a single complaint about a single doctor on a single night. "Officer Rivera," she said thoughtfully, "I believe this situation calls for more than an individual complaint. But for now, yes, I would appreciate it if you would document what you've observed here tonight." The officer nodded respectfully and stepped out, leaving Renee alone with Dr. Chen, the nurse. And Lily. Dr. Chen checked the monitors and adjusted the IV flow. "The antibiotics are starting now," she said. "We should see improvement in her fever within a few hours if it's responding well." "Thank you," Renee said simply, taking Lily's small hand in hers. "For seeing her, for really seeing her." Dr. Chen's eyes met Renee's, and something unspoken passed between them. An acknowledgement of what had really happened in the waiting room, of the battle that had been necessary just to get basic care for her child. "It shouldn't have happened this way," Dr. Chen said quietly. "And I suspect it's not the first time." "No," Renee agreed, thinking of other waiting rooms, other dismissive looks. Other times when she'd had to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. "It's not the first time, but I'm in a position to make sure it happens less often in the future." The hospital room settled into a rhythm of quiet efficiency as Dr. Chen and her team worked around Lily. Monitors beeped steadily, tracking vital signs that Dr. Chen explained were already showing slight improvement. The antibiotics were beginning their work, fighting whatever infection had taken hold of Lily's small body. Renee hadn't left her daughter's side, not even for a moment. She sat in the chair beside the bed, one hand holding Lily's, the other occasionally stroking her forehead. The heat was still there, but perhaps not quite as intense as before. "The fever's starting to respond," Dr. Chen confirmed, checking the monitors. "That's a good sign." Renee nodded, throat tight with emotion. The relief of finally getting proper care for Lily was overwhelming. But it couldn't erase the memory of those desperate hours in the waiting room, the dismissal, the delay, the danger those hours had put her daughter in. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A different nurse poked her head in. "Dr. Chen, the lab results are ready." Dr. Chen stepped out briefly to review the results. When she returned, her expression was both concerned and vindicated. "The initial results confirm bacterial meningitis," she told Renee. "We're still waiting on the specific strain, but we have her on the right antibiotics. We caught it in time to prevent serious complications." The words "caught it in time" hung in the air between them, heavy with the unspoken truth. That this timely treatment had come despite the system, not because of it. "She'll need to stay in the hospital for monitoring and continued IV antibiotics," Dr. Chen continued. "I'd like to transfer her to the pediatric intensive care unit for the next 24 hours. Just to be safe. Whatever she needs, Renee agreed. As Dr. Chen made arrangements for the transfer, Renee's phone buzzed with a text message from her colleague, Justice Monroe. News traveled fast in legal circles, it seemed. Heard you're at Lakeview with Lily. Everything okay? Let me know if you need anything. Renee sent a brief reply explaining the situation. She wasn't surprised that word had spread. The hospital administrator had clearly recognized the potential implications of what had happened tonight. Another gentle knock at the door drew her attention. Officer Rivera stood there, his expression respectful but serious. "Judge Washington," he said quietly, "I wanted to check on your daughter before I finish my shift. How is she doing?" "Responding to treatment," Renee replied. "Thank you for asking," he nodded, seeming genuinely relieved. "Good to hear." He hesitated, then added, "I filed an initial report about tonight's incident. The hospital has security footage that I've requested be preserved. If you decide to pursue this matter further, that evidence will be available." The thought of watching that footage, of seeing herself pleading for help while Dr. Reynolds dismissed her concerns, made Renee's stomach tighten. But the lawyer in her, the judge in her, knew the value of documentation. "Thank you, officer," she said. "I appreciate your thoroughness," Rivera nodded again. "It's the least I can do." He glanced at Lily, then back at Renee. "For what it's worth, Judge, what I saw tonight wasn't right. Not by any standard." After he left, Renee sat in silence, watching Lily's chest rise and fall. The words "not right" echoed in her mind. Such a simple phrase for something so profound and pervasive. The door opened again, this time revealing Philip Thompson, the hospital administrator, accompanied by an older black woman in a tailored suit. Her hair was styled in neat gray locks, and she carried herself with unmistakable authority. "Judge Washington," Thompson said, his voice deferential. "This is Dr. Vivian Carter, our chief of medicine. She wanted to speak with you personally." Dr. Carter stepped forward, her expression somber. "Judge Washington, first and foremost, how is your daughter?" "Responding to treatment," Renee replied, watching the woman carefully. "Dr. Chen says the antibiotics are working." "I'm very glad to hear that," Dr. Carter said, and the sincerity in her voice seemed genuine. She turned to Thompson. "Philip, would you excuse us for a moment?" The administrator looked surprised but nodded and stepped out, closing the door behind him. Once they were alone, Dr. Carter's professional demeanor softened slightly. "Judge Washington, I want to speak candidly with you." One professional to another. Renee nodded, curious about what was coming. Dr. Carter pulled up a chair and sat down, maintaining enough distance to respect the intimate space around the hospital bed where Lily lay. "What happened to you and your daughter tonight is inexcusable," she began, her voice low and steady. "But I'm afraid it's not an isolated incident." Renee wasn't surprised. "No, I didn't think it was. I've been chief of medicine here for 3 years," Dr. Carter continued. "In that time, I've been working to address disparities in care that are deeply embedded in our systems and, unfortunately, in some of our staff. Dr. Reynolds has been a challenge in this regard." "Meaning?" Renee asked, though she already knew. "There have been complaints," Dr. Carter said carefully. "Nothing that quite reached this level of egregiousness, but patterns that concerned me. Patients reporting different treatment, longer wait times for certain demographics, dismissive attitudes toward symptoms. And yet he's still practicing," Renee observed, keeping her voice neutral despite the anger simmering beneath. Dr. Carter's expression tightened. "Healthcare has its bureaucracies just as the legal system does, Judge. Documentation requirements, progressive discipline protocols, union considerations, barriers to accountability," Renee translated. "Yes," Dr. Carter agreed simply. "But what happened tonight?" She shook her head. "This crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed. Your daughter could have suffered permanent harm or worse because of his negligence and bias." The bluntness of the statement hit Renee hard. She'd known it, of course, had felt the fear of it while sitting in that waiting room watching Lily deteriorate. But hearing it stated so plainly by another medical professional made it newly real. "Dr. Carter, why are you telling me this?" she asked directly. The older woman met her gaze steadily. "Because you have power, Judge Washington. Not just because of your position on the bench, though that certainly carries weight, but because what happened here tonight was witnessed. It was documented. It involved a child. And it happened to someone who understands the systems well enough to navigate them." Renee understood immediately. You want me to push this, to make it impossible to sweep under the rug? I want justice, Dr. Carter replied simply. For your daughter, yes, but also for all the patients who didn't have a federal judge as a mother to advocate for them, for all the complaints that didn't have security footage to back them up. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of Lily's monitors. Renee looked at her daughter, her color already improving slightly, and thought of other children who might not have been so fortunate. I intend to address what happened, Renee said finally. But I need to focus on Lily's recovery first. Of course, Dr. Carter agreed, standing up. That's as it should be. I just wanted you to know that when you're ready, there are those within this institution who will support efforts for meaningful change. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. My direct number is on the back, day or night. As Dr. Carter turned to leave, the door opened again and a young doctor stepped in, nearly colliding with her. He looked startled to see the chief of medicine there. Dr. Carter, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were here, he stammered. I just came to check on the patient. Dr. Carter nodded. Quite all right, Dr. Lee. She looked back at Renee. This is Dr. Lee, one of our best pediatric specialists. He'll be taking over Lily's care once she's transferred to the PICU. Dr. Lee smiled warmly at Renee, then froze as recognition dawned on his face. Judge Washington? Oh wow, I didn't realize… He stopped himself, clearly trying to regain his professional composure. I mean, it's an honor to meet you, Your Honor. I attended your lecture at the law school last year on medical ethics and legal responsibility. It was brilliant. Renee remembered the lecture, a special series she'd done for law and medical students about the intersection of their fields. Thank you, Dr. Lee, she replied. Though I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. He nodded, looking abashed. Of course. I'm sorry about what happened in the ER. The whole hospital is talking about it. He glanced nervously at Dr. Carter, perhaps worried he'd said too much. Dr. Carter simply raised an eyebrow. I think we can dispense with pretending this isn't being discussed, Dr. Lee. Transparency will be essential going forward. The young doctor seemed relieved. Yes, ma'am. He turned his attention to Lily, checking her chart and vitals with careful attention. She's responding well to the antibiotics. That's excellent. As he continued his examination, Renee watched how gentle he was with Lily, how he explained each step of what he was doing, even though Lily was still mostly asleep. This was what proper care looked like. Attentive, respectful, thorough. The stark contrast between Dr. Lee's approach and Dr. Reynolds' earlier dismissal only highlighted the injustice of what had happened. It wasn't about individual doctors being kind or unkind. It was about who was deemed worthy of that care, that attention, that respect from the start. After Dr. Lee finished his examination and left, promising to check in again before the transfer to the PICU, Renee found herself alone with Lily once more. The room was quiet, save for the steady beeping of machines and the soft sound of her daughter's breathing. Easier now than it had been hours earlier. She reached for her phone and opened her email, creating a new draft. The subject line read simply, Incident at Lakeview Memorial Hospital, 9/29/25. She began typing, documenting everything that had happened while it was still fresh in her mind. Times, names, exact quotes as she remembered them. As a judge, Renee knew the power of documentation, of creating a record. As a mother, she knew the fire of protection, the need to ensure that what happened to Lily wouldn't happen to another child. And as a Black woman who had navigated systems designed without people like her in mind, she knew that change rarely came without pressure, without someone willing to push past the barriers of, that's just how things are. Lily stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. Mommy? She whispered, her voice weak but clearer than it had been in the waiting room. Renee immediately set the phone aside and leaned closer. I'm here, baby. Mommy's right here. My head doesn't hurt so much anymore, Lily said softly. That's good, sweetheart. The medicine is helping you feel better. Lily's gaze traveled around the room, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. Are we still at the hospital? Yes, we are. The doctors are taking good care of you now. Lily was quiet for a moment, then asked, Was that man mad at us? The doctor who was yelling? Renee's heart clenched at the question. Even in her feverish state, Lily had been aware enough to pick up on Dr. Reynolds' hostility. He wasn't being a very good doctor. Renee said carefully. But the doctors taking care of you now are excellent. Lily seemed to accept this, her eyelids growing heavy again. You made them listen, she murmured, already drifting back to sleep. You always make them listen. The words hit Renee with unexpected force. You always make them listen. How many times had Lily seen her mother have to fight to be heard? How many times had she witnessed what it took for Renee to be taken seriously, to be respected, to be believed? As Lily fell back asleep, Renee returned to her email draft with renewed purpose. She would make them listen this time too, not just for Lily, but for all the patients who didn't have the platform, the position, the privilege to make themselves heard. In the corner of the room, a small TV was turned to a local news station, the volume low. A headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Local federal judge alleges discrimination at Lakeview Memorial Hospital. News traveled fast indeed. Renee hadn't made any public statement yet, but the mere fact that a federal judge had been involved in an incident at the hospital was apparently newsworthy enough. Her phone buzzed again. A message from her clerk. Then another from a reporter she'd worked with in the past. The story was spreading, taking on a life of its own. Renee looked at Lily, peaceful now, getting the care she should have received hours ago. The case forming in her mind wasn't just about one night or one doctor. It was about systems that decided who deserved care and who didn't, who was believed and who was dismissed, whose pain mattered and whose could be ignored. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. A nurse she hadn't seen before stood there looking somewhat starstruck. Judge Washington? She said hesitantly. I just wanted to check if you needed anything, and to say thank you. Thank you? Renee repeated, surprised. The nurse nodded, stepping further into the room. For not letting this slide, for using your voice. Some of us have been trying to report problems for years, but... She trailed off, the implication clear, but no one was listening. Renee finished for her. Exactly. The nurse glanced at Lily. She's looking better already. Dr. Chen is one of the good ones. So is Dr. Lee. And Dr. Reynolds? Renee asked quietly. The nurse's expression hardened. He shouldn't be practicing medicine. Not the way he does it. She hesitated, then added, There are records, you know, patterns in wait times and treatment decisions. Data doesn't lie, even when people do. With that, she slipped out, leaving Renee with a new thread to pull, a new angle to explore. Data, records, patterns that could be analyzed and presented, evidence that could tell a story beyond one night and one child. Renee returned to her email, adding notes about possible records to request, analyses to run. The judge in her was building a case piece by methodical piece. The mother in her was making sure that next time, someone else's child wouldn't have to wait until it was almost too late. Outside the room, the hospital continued its night rhythm, but something had shifted. News was spreading from department to department, conversation to conversation. A federal judge, a sick child, a doctor's bias exposed, and underneath it all, the question that would eventually demand an answer. How many others had suffered in silence before someone with power finally made them listen? 3 weeks had passed since that harrowing night at Lakeview Memorial Hospital. Lily sat on the couch in their living room, surrounded by the stuffed animals and books that friends and family had sent during her recovery. The pediatric meningitis had been caught in time to prevent any lasting damage, and day by day, she had returned to her usual spirited self. Renee watched her daughter from the kitchen doorway, a mug of tea warming her hands. There were moments still, when the memory of Lily limp and burning with fever in her arms would flash through her mind, bringing with it the cold dread of what could have happened if Dr. Chen hadn't intervened. Mommy, can I have some juice? Lily called, looking up from the picture book she was flipping through. Of course, sweetheart. Renee set down her tea and poured apple juice into Lily's favorite cup, the one with constellations that glowed in the dark. Such a small, ordinary moment, yet it filled her with gratitude. Things could have gone so differently. As Lily sipped her juice, Renee's phone buzzed on the counter. It was Patricia, her law clerk. Judge Washington, the hospital board, just released their statement. It's already hitting the news sites. Thanks, Patricia. Send me the link? A moment later, her phone pinged with the message. Renee opened it, her heart beating a little faster as she read, Lakeview Memorial Hospital Board announces major changes following investigation into discrimination allegations. She skimmed the article quickly, noting the careful language that balanced legal caution with surprising forthrightness. Following a comprehensive review of patient care protocols and practices, Lakeview Memorial Hospital acknowledges significant disparities in emergency room wait times and treatment decisions that correlate with patient demographics. The investigation was prompted by an incident involving federal judge Renee Washington and her daughter last month, but expanded to examine hospital-wide data from the past 5 years. The statement went on to outline specific changes. Implementation of a blind triage system, where initial assessment would be done without patient demographic information visible. Mandatory bias training for all staff, with specialized sessions for emergency department personnel. Creation of a new oversight committee with community representatives to monitor compliance with equity goals. Installation of wait time displays in the emergency room, with regular audits to detect patterns of disparity. A formal apology to Judge Washington and her daughter, as well as to all patients who may have experienced inequitable care. What the statement didn't mention, but what Patricia confirmed in a follow-up text, was that Dr. Reynolds had been placed on administrative leave pending a medical board review of his license. Several other complaints had emerged once the investigation began, with patterns too clear to ignore. Renee set down the phone, emotions swirling. This was what she had pushed for in the weeks following Lily's hospitalization. She had declined the hospital's initial offer of a private settlement, instead demanding a systemic review and public accountability. She had shared the security footage with carefully selected media outlets when the hospital's internal investigation seemed to be stalling. She had pulled together a team of healthcare data analysts to examine years of hospital records, identifying unmistakable patterns in wait times and treatment decisions across racial and socioeconomic lines. It hadn't been about revenge against one doctor. It had been about changing a system that too often determined care based on who patients were, rather than what they needed. The doorbell rang, pulling Renee from her thoughts. She opened the front door to find Elena, her friend and fellow judge, standing there with a folder tucked under one arm and a bakery box in her hands. "I brought celebration cupcakes," Elena announced, stepping inside. "Chocolate for Lily and that lemon one you like for you." Lily perked up at the word cupcakes, setting aside her book and coming to investigate. "Hi, Aunt Elena. There's my brave girl," Elena said warmly, bending down for a hug. "How are you feeling?" "All better," Lily declared. "Dr. Lee says I'm the fastest healer he's ever seen." "That doesn't surprise me one bit," Elena replied, winking at Renee over Lily's head. After Lily had chosen her cupcake and returned to the couch to enjoy it, Elena set the folder on the kitchen counter. "You've seen the hospital's statement?" she asked. Renee nodded. "Just now. It's more than I expected, honestly. Hospitals don't usually admit to systemic issues so plainly." "They didn't have much choice," Renee said. "The data was undeniable once we got access to it, and the media attention didn't give them room to bury it." Elena opened the folder, revealing printouts of news articles and social media posts. "It's gone well beyond Lakeview, you know. Your case has sparked reviews at hospitals in 3 neighboring counties. There's talk of state-level legislation requiring emergency departments to track and publish wait time data by demographic Renee hadn't anticipated. The ripple effect when she'd first begun pushing for accountability. She'd simply been a mother determined to ensure that what happened to Lily wouldn't happen to another child. But her position had given her a platform, and she'd used it. "There's something else," Elena said, pulling out a particular article. "This was published this morning in the Medical Ethics Journal. It's by Dr. Chen and Dr. Carter from Lakeview." Renee took the paper, scanning the title, "Structural Bias in Emergency Triage, a Case Study and Call for Reform." "They've used your case, anonymized, of course, as the centerpiece of an argument for national reform," Elena explained. Dr. Carter called it, "the case that finally forced us to confront what we've known but failed to address for too long." "I never expected this kind of response," Renee admitted. Elena smiled knowingly. "No, you just did what you always do. Pursued justice methodically and thoroughly. The response is because you touched a nerve. This isn't just about one hospital or one doctor. It's about patterns people have experienced but couldn't prove." Renee's phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail but decided to answer. Judge Washington? This is Tanya Richards from Channel 7 News. We're doing a special report on healthcare disparities tonight, and we'd love to have you join us for an interview about the changes at Lakeview Memorial and what they might mean for healthcare equity more broadly. It wasn't the first media request she'd received, but Renee had been selective about which ones she accepted. This one, focused on the broader implications rather than just her personal experience, seemed worth considering. I'm interested, but I'd need more details about the focus of your segment, she replied. As they discussed the parameters of the potential interview, Renee watched Lily happily enjoying her cupcake, chocolate frosting smeared across her cheek. The sight brought both joy and resolve. This was why the fight mattered, not just for Lily, but for all the children who deserved to be seen, to be believed, to be treated with equal care and concern. After finishing the call, she agreed to the interview with specific conditions. Renee joined Elena at the kitchen table. I just got off the phone with Dr. Lee yesterday, she said. He's been appointed to head the new oversight committee at Lakeview. He asked if I'd be willing to consult. Elena raised her eyebrows. Will you? I'm considering it, Renee replied. Change happens from the inside, too, not just from external pressure. Their conversation was interrupted by the doorbell again. This time it was a delivery, a large envelope from the hospital board. Inside was a formal letter of apology, signed by every board member, along with detailed documentation of the changes being implemented. What caught Renee's attention, though, was the smaller envelope tucked inside, addressed to Lily. Inside was a handwritten note from Dr. Chen. Dear Lily, I want you to know how brave you were during your time at our hospital. Your courage has helped us become better at taking care of all children who come to us for help. I've enclosed something special that I hope will inspire you. Beneath the note was a children's book about a young girl who becomes a doctor, and a small toy stethoscope. Lily, Renee called. You have a gift from Dr. Chen. Lily came running, her face lighting up when she saw the book and toy. Can I be a doctor like Dr. Chen someday? She asked, putting the toy stethoscope around her neck. You can be anything you work hard to become, Renee told her, smoothing her daughter's hair. As Lily went to show Elena her new gift, Renee's phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Patricia again, this time with a link to a newly filed civil rights complaint against another hospital in the city, citing the Lakeview case as precedent. The work was spreading, taking on momentum beyond what she'd initially set in motion. Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed and Elena had left, Renee sat in her home office reviewing her notes for the upcoming interview. On her desk was a photo of Lily taken just last week, her smile bright and her eyes clear. No trace of the illness that had nearly claimed her. Beside it was a copy of the hospital's new triage protocol, sent to her for review. The phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Carter. Judge Washington, I hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all, Doctor. I was just reviewing some materials. I wanted to let you know personally before it becomes public tomorrow. The medical board has suspended Dr. Reynolds' license pending further investigation. Multiple patients have come forward with similar experiences since your case gained attention. Renee absorbed this news quietly. It wasn't about one doctor, had never been about one doctor, but accountability mattered all the same. There's something else, Dr. Carter continued. The mayor has asked me to head a citywide task force on healthcare equity. We'll be examining practices across all hospitals in the metro area. I'd like you to serve as a consultant if you're willing. I'm willing, Renee replied without hesitation. This is too important to leave half-finished. After they'd discussed the details and ended the call, Renee walked to Lily's bedroom, gently opening the door to check on her. Her daughter slept peacefully, the toy stethoscope still clutched in her hand, the moonlight casting a soft glow across her face. This was why she'd pushed so hard, why she'd refused to let the incident be swept aside as an unfortunate misunderstanding, not for revenge or compensation, but for change. Real, lasting change that might mean some other mother wouldn't have to fight so hard to get care for her child. Some other child wouldn't have to wait until it was almost too late. Some other family wouldn't have to wonder if they were seen as less worthy, less important, less human. Renee knew the work was far from over. Systems didn't change overnight and resistance was inevitable. But standing in her daughter's doorway, watching her breathe easily in her sleep, Renee felt something she hadn't expected: hope. Not just for justice, but for healing. Not just for accountability, but for transformation. Sometimes it took a crisis to create an opening for change. Sometimes it took someone with power using that power for those who had less of it. And sometimes it took a mother's love and a judge's determination coming together in a perfect storm that could no longer be ignored. Renee closed Lily's door softly and returned to her office. Tomorrow there would be more work to do. The interview, the consultation with the hospital, the expanding ripples of the case she had set in motion. But for tonight, she allowed herself to feel the weight of what had been accomplished and the promise of what was yet to come. It wasn't just about one night in an emergency room anymore. It was about all the nights to come, all the patients yet to walk through those doors, all the children like Lily who deserved to be seen, not for who they were, but for what they needed. It was about a system finally forced to confront its failings and begin the long process of making things right. And that, Renee thought as she closed her laptop and prepared for bed, was worth every bit of the fight.